What is up, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we are diving deep into a story of neighborly conflict that escalated into an all-out, scorched earth war. We've all had annoying neighbors, right? The ones who play music too loud, or let their dog poop in your yard. But imagine having a neighbor who is so arrogant, so entitled, that he truly believes the rules of society just don't apply to him. Our narrator today, Mike, was pushed past his breaking point when this neighbor, Gary, destroyed something deeply important and valuable, then had the gall to laugh in his face and tell him to sue me. Mike didn't just sue him. He used his secret weapon, his connections and knowledge of the city's dark underbelly, to deliver a cold dish of revenge so complete, so satisfying, that Gary literally lost everything he owned. This is one of the most brilliant acts of professional revenge I have ever read. You absolutely need to stick around for this. Let's get into it. My entitled neighbor ruined my $80,000 custom car and told me to sue him. I smiled, sent a mysterious text to a city inspector, and watched as he lost everything. I want to preface this by saying that I am usually a very patient person. I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt, and I absolutely hate drama. But sometimes, when someone is just so fundamentally entitled, you have no choice but to teach them a lesson in consequences. And that's exactly what happened with my former neighbor, Gary. My wife and I moved into our new home about 3 years ago. It's a great neighborhood, quiet, lots of trees, good schools. Everything was perfect, except for Gary, who lived right next door. From day one, Gary was a problem. He had this loud, obnoxious personality, but he presented it as confidence. He was the kind of guy who drove a lifted truck with oversized tires and referred to himself as a self-made success at every single barbecue. I work in municipal engineering and zoning. I'm not some fancy high-powered lawyer, but I know how the city works, and more importantly, I know the labyrinthine complexity of every single ordinance, regulation, and permitting process in our town. I basically spend my days making sure that things are built correctly, or punishing people who haven't bothered to get the right paperwork. Gary didn't know this about me. He just assumed I was some quiet suburban drone. Our conflicts started small. Gary would constantly throw loud, unannounced parties that lasted until 3 a.m. on Tuesday nights. When I asked him to turn the music down, he'd stare at me with this blank, annoyed expression, like I was interrupting his genius. "Dude, it's summer, chill out," was his favorite response. He'd also regularly trim his trees by basically chopping them and dropping the dead wood directly onto my side of the fence, requiring me to clean up his mess. I'd mention it politely, and he'd say, just grab a beer and relax, man. It's just branches. The biggest and most annoying constant issue was his driveway. Our properties were separated by a shared concrete driveway leading to our respective garages. Gary, however, treated the entire shared space and about 2 feet of my actual lawn like his personal parking lot for his various oversized toys, a boat, a camper, and that ridiculous lifted truck. I had put up a small, temporary barrier marking the property line, but he'd run over it constantly, claiming, "It's all pavement, Mike. Don't be so precious." This led to my biggest concern, my car. I'm a car guy. It's my one real expensive hobby. I spent years rebuilding and customizing a 1970 Ford Bronco. It was flawless. The paint was pristine, the engine was perfect, and the interior was totally redone. Insurance valued it at around $80,000, and it was my absolute baby. I stored it in my garage, obviously, but sometimes I'd pull it out on the weekend to wash it or just sit in the sun. This past spring, I was planning to take the Bronco to a regional show. I had spent the better part of Saturday morning detailing it. I wiped down the chrome, polished the paint until it looked like glass, and adjusted the engine timing. I pulled it out into the driveway, right up against the edge of my garage, well within my property line, to let the fresh wax cure in the sun. I went inside to grab a bottle of water. That's when I heard the screech of tires and this sickening, drawn-out crunching sound. It was the sound of fiberglass ripping, metal scraping, and glass shattering. I sprinted back outside, and my blood went cold. Gary was backing his enormous lifted truck out of his garage, and he hadn't bothered to look behind him. His oversized back tire had completely mounted the front hood of my Bronco, tearing off the passenger side fender, smashing the headlight, and buckling the hood right down the middle. I stood there, staring at the destruction. My $80,000 dream car, ruined. Gary finally noticed me, stopped the truck, and jumped out. He looked at the mess, then back at me. He wasn't apologetic, he was annoyed. "Oh, crap," he said, rubbing his neck. "Guess you shouldn't have parked your little toy right there." My little toy? I could barely breathe. "Gary, you just destroyed an $80,000 vehicle. It was parked on my property." He just scoffed. "Look, I'm late for the lake. Send me the repair quote, whatever. I'll get my insurance to handle it, but it's probably just a fender, right? A couple $100? I felt my fists clench so hard my knuckles were white. "The paint alone is custom, Gary. The fiberglass needs to be replaced, the frame inspected. This is major damage." "Whatever, man," he waved his hand dismissively. "If you're going to be dramatic about it, just sue me. I've got better lawyers than you can afford, and my insurance company will drag this out for 5 years. You'll be lucky to get half what you think it's worth. Honestly, a guy like you driving a classic car is hilarious anyway. It's like a nerd trying to look cool." He laughed a deep, booming, entitled laugh, then got back in his truck and sped off, tires squealing as he left me standing there amidst the wreckage of my car. I didn't call the police immediately. I didn't call my insurance. I just stood there, letting the red haze of pure, unadulterated rage consume me. I looked at the damage, then I looked at Gary's house. And then, slowly, a cold, calculated clarity began to settle over me. Gary wanted me to sue him. He wanted a legal battle he could drag out and win through sheer financial attrition. He thought I was just some random, impotent guy he could bully. He had no idea who he had just messed with. I walked back inside, ignoring my wife's frantic questions, and went straight to my home office. I sat down at my computer, pulled up the city's zoning maps, and focused intensely on Gary's property address. I knew our neighborhood had strict covenants, but I needed the legal leverage only the city could provide. The first thing I looked at was the back of his house. Gary had built a massive, 2-story detached garage/workshop behind his main dwelling about 4 years ago. It was huge, maybe 1,500 square feet. He used it to store his boat in the winter and work on engines. I remembered watching him build it, mostly by himself, with maybe one helper. He'd bragged about how he was sticking it to the man by doing all the work himself. I pulled up the permits for the address. Nothing for the back structure. Zero record of any application for a detached building permit, electrical wiring, or occupancy clearance. I checked the setback requirements for detached structures in our zone. In our specific zoning class, any detached structure over 120 square feet must maintain a 25-foot setback from the rear property line and 10 feet from the side. Gary's monstrosity was maybe 5 feet from the back fence line and 3 feet from my side fence. It was grossly non-compliant. Next, I checked the height restrictions. Detached auxiliary structures couldn't be more than 15 feet tall. Gary's was clearly pushing 20, mainly because he wanted space for his lift and storage. Then I moved to his front yard. His enormous paved parking area was also illegal. Our zone only allows a certain percentage of impermeable surface area in the front yard. Gary had paved nearly half his front lawn to accommodate his truck and camper, which meant zero drainage, causing runoff problems onto my yard whenever it rained hard. That was a serious violation. Finally, I checked his truck. That ridiculous, oversized truck with the massive tires that tore up my Bronco. In our municipality, any vehicle requiring a Class C commercial license to operate, or exceeding certain weight or height restrictions, cannot be routinely parked in a residential driveway. Gary's truck, with its lift kit, was almost certainly too tall for the residential vehicle code and might even require a commercial plate depending on the weight classification. I spent the next 48 hours compiling a dossier that would make a lawyer weep with joy. It wasn't just one violation, it was a systemic, fundamental disregard for every single zoning law intended to maintain the character and safety of our neighborhood. Gary had built his entire lifestyle on a foundation of illegally constructed structures and zero compliance. All because he thought he was too smart to follow the rules and too rich to face consequences. And I, Mike, the quiet suburban drone, was the one holding the keys to his complete financial ruin. I didn't call an insurance adjuster. I didn't call the police about the hit and run, yet. I called my contact at the city planning office, a guy named Stan who owed me a massive favor for helping him untangle a complicated sewer issue last year. Stan was a zoning compliance officer, the guy who issues the big fines and stop work orders. I called him late Sunday afternoon. "Hey Stan, it's Mike. I need a favor. A big one." I kept it vague. I told him I had discovered a significant and potentially hazardous non-compliant structure in my neighborhood, and I needed an immediate, full-spectrum inspection, done by the book, 0 warnings. "What zone are we talking about?" Stan asked. I gave him Gary's address. "It's a detached garage/workshop. I have reason to believe it violates multiple setback, height, and impervious surface regulations. It might even have unpermitted electrical work." Stan whistled. "That sounds like a nightmare. You know this means heavy fines and potentially demolition if it's too non-compliant, right?" "I'm aware," I said calmly. "And I want you to hit him with everything you've got. Make it clear he has 0 recourse." Stan agreed. "Consider it done. I'll send an inspector out first thing Tuesday morning, and I'll personally review the enforcement notices." I hung up, feeling a profound sense of cold satisfaction. Gary wanted to play hardball? Fine. I would play the long game. The car damage was temporary, the zoning violations were permanent. Tuesday morning, I went to work as usual, but I watched my window. Right at 9:15 a.m., a nondescript white sedan pulled up outside Gary's house. 2 men in official-looking shirts got out, carrying clipboards and measuring tapes. I saw them walk directly to Gary's massive detached workshop. Gary, who was out washing his boat, walked over, smiling smugly, probably thinking they were selling something. I saw him try to wave them off, but the inspector held up his badge and started pointing the measuring tape at the garage. Gary's demeanor changed instantly. He started gesturing wildly, arguing, trying to escort them off his property. It didn't work. The inspectors were methodical. They measured the distance to the fence lines, noted the height, and even pulled out a special tool to measure the ratio of paved versus grass area in his front yard. One of the inspectors even took pictures of Gary's lifted truck parked partially on his illegal paving pad. I got a text from Stan around lunchtime, address confirmed. "You weren't kidding. This guy is in deep. Violation notice is being issued today. Multiple citations for non-compliance, unpermitted work, and environmental infractions. Total initial fine estimate is hitting $25,000, and that's just a start. We've issued a stop-use/order to remediate immediately." The order to remediate was the key. It meant Gary couldn't just pay a fine, he had to fix the violation. And fixing the setback violation on a 1,500 square foot building that was 5 feet too close to the property line meant one thing: partial, if not complete, demolition. When I got home that evening, the scene next door was chaos. Gary was pacing his yard, screaming into his phone. He looked pale and frantic. There were bright orange official city stickers plastered all over the doors of his gigantic workshop and even on his front sidewalk. He didn't even look at me. The next day, Gary tried to hire a contractor to pull retro permits, but since the structure was so fundamentally non-compliant, literally impossible to meet the setback requirements without moving the entire building, it was a dead end. I casually parked my heavily damaged Bronco in my driveway, draped with a tarp, a constant, silent reminder of his arrogance. Gary cornered me 2 days later as I was getting my mail. He wasn't arrogant anymore, he was desperate. "Mike, look, about the car, I was a jerk. Total jerk. My insurance will cover it. I'll pay your deductible. Just, can you call whoever did this? My wife is freaking out. They say I have to pay $25,000 in fines and start tearing down the garage in 30 days. I looked at him, gave him the coldest, slowest smile I could manage, and shrugged. Tough break, Gary. You should have thought about the rules when you built it. But they just showed up. Nobody complained before. This is targeted harassment, he wailed. Is the structure built according to code? I asked, keeping my voice level. Well, no, but. Then you have no complaint, Gary, I cut him off. You got caught. You told me to sue you because you thought you could win. Well, I didn't sue you. I just followed the rules. You told me to deal with the consequences of my little toy being parked where you hit it. Now you can deal with the consequences of your little toy being built where it shouldn't be. He stared at me, his eyes wide as he finally realized the quiet drone next door wasn't so powerless after all. You did this? I just pointed out a very large, very obvious public safety and zoning violation, I corrected him. You built a $50,000 structure illegally. That's on you. The next few weeks were glorious. Gary hired a legal team, trying to appeal the fines and the remediation order. Every time they tried to file an injunction or appeal, Stan's office would reject it instantly, citing 3 pages of specific, irrefutable code violations. My knowledge of zoning laws was bulletproof, and Stan, having my back, ensured the city's enforcement was mercilessly effective. Gary quickly discovered that fighting the city is a lot harder and more expensive than fighting an insurance claim. His lawyer fees piled up, the initial $25,000 fine was confirmed, and the timeline for demolition was holding firm. The kicker? The bank that held Gary's mortgage got wind of the zoning violations. Because the auxiliary structure was unpermitted, it violated the terms of his loan. More critically, the extent of the non-compliance, specifically the impervious surface violations and the illegal garage, made the property essentially unsecurable and impossible to sell in its current state. The bank declared the loan in technical default and demanded immediate payment to correct the violations. Gary didn't have the cash. He certainly didn't have the cash to hire a full crew to demolish and rebuild the entire structure to code, nor pay the massive legal fees, fines, and the principal on his mortgage simultaneously. Exactly 3 months after he wrecked my car and laughed in my face, Gary's house went into foreclosure. He had to fire sale all his toys, the boat, the camper, and even that ridiculous lifted truck, just to try and cover the mounting fines and legal fees. He didn't even get half of what he asked for. I got my insurance settlement for the Bronco, a full $82,000, actually, and I had the car professionally rebuilt over the summer. It's now even better than before. As for Gary, he and his family packed up and moved out last month. He didn't say goodbye, just loaded a small U-Haul and drove away, leaving behind the empty, stickered husk of his illegal workshop that the bank would now have to deal with. My wife, who was initially worried about the escalation, now refers to me as her zoning vigilante. I just smile. The cost of repairing my car? $80,000. The cost of Gary's arrogance and illegal construction? Losing his entire home, his savings, and his ego. He told me to sue him. I didn't. I just weaponized bureaucracy, and it cost him everything. And honestly, I have never felt more satisfied in my life. Wow. Just incredible. Mike didn't just win a settlement, he delivered a masterclass in professional, systematic revenge. When Gary told him to sue me, he never anticipated the true power of an informed, highly motivated neighbor. This is the definition of leveraging the system for justice. Now, the big question for you all, was Mike's revenge justified, or did he take it too far by effectively costing Gary his entire house? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If this story gave you that satisfying chill, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. See you in the next one.